Need some suspension work and shocks and brakes, brake pads, lining, steering box, transmission, rear end.
Ka-chow.
Just don't see no cars! It works! I love this button!
Always remember, if you ain't first, you're last.
106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
All right, welcome back to the Unnamed Movie Car Podcast, recording at you live from many European tracks across the world.
That's right.
Because today we are talking about the Netflix documentary Schumacher.
Yep.
And it is Zack, Gary, and joined by Nick today.
Our resident F1 expert. So.
And brother / son
generous.
of the hosts.
True. Exactly. So it's all good. Yep.
So normally, well, first of all, check us out on Spotify if you're listening on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube if you're listening to us on Spotify. We have our website. All that stuff will be linked in the description below, blah, blah, blah. Please go check that stuff out. Normally, we do wait the 10 minutes to do a spoiler. However, since this is a documentary, there's no real point because it's real life. So it's like spoiling that the Titanic sinks.
Right, exactly.
At the end of the movie.
It does? What?
Yeah,
Hey,
unfortunately. Sorry to spoil that one.
All right, I'm not watching Titanic then.
But yeah, today we're talking about Schumacher.
Yeah.
However,
Schumacher,
something I do want to talk to you about is your relationship with F1 and that last night you started watching Drive to Survive.
I did. So some of my comments might be a blur mix between Schumacher and F1 Drive to Survive.
Yeah, you went on a little F1 binge last night.
I did. Because you had suggested that I start that, and I want to try and learn more because Nick here knows a lot about F1, and when he talks about stuff, and I want to know, I want to really know how much more I can hate Niki Lauda.
Oh yeah,
Not just kidding. He's a joke.
Hard
it's a
person
joke.
To
it's
like.
a joke. I don't hate him. I just hate the movie.
You really hate the movie Rush. I mean, you really, really hate it through and through.
There's a lot of good reasons why I don't like it.
So I think we should do a separate episode on Drive to Survive.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But what's your first take on it? Because you're only like an episode or two into the very first season.
Well, for me, it's very cool. Yeah. I mean. We were Nick and I were talking about it. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of things that I didn't really expect. I guess it's a soap opera.
It is,
and it really is. It's kind of a
much to the chagrin of a lot of F1 fans. They feel like it is sort of played up drama, which I think it is too. Yeah. But it's a very entertaining show.
Yeah, I mean, that show itself was very, very entertaining. I learned a lot immediately. I mean, it was instantly I started to learn some of the names and got a little bit more familiar with the Haas, the
only American team on the grid.
Only American team.
Which is just like such the worst showing for America.
Oh, I think it's just hilarious.
Yeah.
So I
their NASCAR team does well, but
yeah.
They have a NASCAR branch?
Oh yeah.
I did not.
Yeah. I didn't know they had a NASCAR branch.
Yeah, Gene Haas, who's the owner of, the Haas, is in F1 and NASCAR, and their NASCAR is wildly successful, and their F1 is not so much.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good to know. But no, my reaction to the show was that this is really cool. I mean, it's really it's a soap opera for guys.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is. I mean, it's really, truly, there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of, people way over the edge, psychologically.
Yeah. I really believe
so.
that in order to be an F1 driver, you have to have a couple screws loose in the right spots because there's so much danger. There's so much that goes into it.
Right.
And egos are so... rampant.
Yes.
Which is why I think this documentary was very interesting because I feel like Michael Schumacher sort of broke that mold. But before we get into that, any last thoughts on the sport? Any last thoughts on?
It's fascinating to me. I had no idea. Like I was telling Nick earlier, when I grew up, we had people like Jackie Stewart. I mean, that was our, who else? I was talking about that today. There was.
There were Mario
Andretti, all that. That was my generation. That was, my group and stuff, especially Jackie Stewart because he became an announcer. And so you always remember his voice as he was announcing the races, but I never really got into it, never really understood a lot behind it. And so, yeah, it's fascinating to me. It really is interesting. So I'll
Did
continue.
you, by chance, see the video that F1 posted on YouTube of Seb naming every single champion
Yeah.
from
What?
2020? Yeah, ever in the sport.
Sebastian Vettel.
Oh.
He named every single F1 champion all the way
Off
back
the
to
top
the
of his head.
50s.
I can do that.
Yeah, no, I don't think you can, because none
Not
of the
even
other
close.
drivers on the grid even could.
Yeah, seriously.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Seriously?
very.
And he
Okay,
sat there.
alright.
And he said, "I have
All
as
right.
long as I need," and they said yes.
Yeah, wow.
And he sat
okay.
down and he went, "All right, 2020, 2019, 2018, all the way back to 1951."
Wow.
Yeah, I think
Really?
it was the first
Off the top
So
of
you
his
could
head.
name. Wow.
Back to the
That's nuts.
Fangio
See,
days.
I can't do any of that stuff.
But
I'm
yeah,
not that into it. Yeah.
So I started learning about F1 really last year. I did the whole Drive to Survive series in pretty quick succession. Season 2 and Season 3 was within a couple of days because my girlfriend and I went on a cross-country road trip,
Right.
and we had a bunch of time to kill in the car, so we would
Yeah.
just watch Drive to Survive while driving
Oh,
through
yeah.
the mountains of Colorado. And but after watching that series, I've started to follow the sport itself, and
Yeah.
I've been getting more into it, and I think I have a decent grasp on the current series and current season, but I wanted to start going backwards, which is why I picked the Schumacher documentary.
Oh, okay.
It also
All right,
came
yeah.
out last
Yeah.
year in 2021, so it's a fairly recent documentary. End of
Yeah.
I think it was like September, October of 21.
Right.
So it's a newer documentary, and so that's why I kind of wanted to dive into it.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I'll be absolutely honest with you. I did not want to watch this movie. I
Yeah.
absolutely did not want to, because I thought it was going to be boring. I thought it was going to be okay. Here we go with another F1 driver. They're all self-absorbed and blah blah blah, and they're just all crazy and all this stuff, and they're just really, just egomaniacs. Blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And it showed a really interesting picture of an interesting person. I mean, I think that's really the majority of what this is about. It's really they showed him from a lot of different angles. So before I guess we don't really have
we don't
spoilers
really
in
have
this one,
spoilers. So like,
yeah.
I'm very curious to hear someone who doesn't have pretty much almost any prior knowledge of Michael Schumacher besides
Yes,
maybe
true.
you bought me I want to say like 2005 or 2006 maybe. I had the Lego set of Michael Schumacher.
Oh, really?
They had an F1 Lego car.
Okay.
I had no idea what F1 was. I never really got
Was
attached
that
to
the
it. but-
Ferrari car?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
a red
All right.
Ferrari,
Yeah.
and
It's also when F1 cars looked just like Indy cars.
yeah.
Oh.
So a lot of people confuse that Lego set with IndyCar in the States.
Well, okay. It's interesting you say that. What is the difference? What is the difference
Oh, boy.
between the cars? Okay.
So IndyCar is an American-based series. It's
Okay.
it's still open wheel racing.
Yeah.
So open wheel meaning there's no fenders over the
Right.
wheels.
Okay.
So it's still open wheel racing, but Indy cars run a different engine setup. They run, I mean, if you know, they're a night and day difference.
Really.
And Indy cars only run here in the States. They
Okay.
run road tracks and oval tracks.
Okay.
And there's a lot more teams than there are in F1. A lot more teams, a lot more drivers. The rules are completely different. And nowadays, they look nothing alike.
Okay.
To an untrained eye, they still look very, very similar. But like in terms of, and if you saw them side by side, you'd
Yeah,
be able to
I'm
pick out a
totally
million things.
confused now because I always thought that Indy and F1 were like the same.
As a kid, I did too, and
Yeah,
like I very clearly see why. But
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong. Indy does not hit the top speeds that F1 hits.
Nope,
Yeah.
it does not.
Really, Indy cars.
Indy
don't-
cars do not hit the top speeds that F1 cars hit. They are, I can say from experience, not as loud.
Really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Okay,
took
yeah.
earplugs to the IndyCar race at Road America,
Yeah.
and in some aspects didn't need them.
Hmm.
I would have been deaf if I didn't wear earplugs when I went to that F1 exhibit.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is actually a complete like eye opener. I'm
Yeah.
serious. I did not know this, that the Indy cars and the F1s were totally different.
IndyCar, so in the last couple of years, F1 cars have gotten what's called the safety halo.
Oh.
So it's like a
Okay.
ring that goes around the top. It protects the driver's heads if the car flips over, if it's in an accident or something.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure you saw that in Drive to Survive.
I
There's like a
probably
hoop
did.
above their heads.
I probably did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
didn't notice it.
It was well
Because I'm-
in the original season of Drive to Survive, it was brand new.
Oh. Okay.
So it was a brand new addition to the car. It always was. Their head just kind of popped out of the cockpit,
right, exactly, yeah.
and that's kind of what everybody knew. But there were so many drivers that had so many serious injuries because of it
Yeah.
that they added the halo.
Well, I saw a lot of like neck braces, like braces that go so that
Yep.
they don't do whiplash.
It's called the
things.
Hans device.
Hans
Yes.
device,
Yeah,
really?
so you
Okay.
don't get whiplash.
Yeah.
We have one for the Spec Miata.
No,
Yeah.
really.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's
Any-
required in most motorsports.
Any
now.
wheel-to-wheel racing is going to have some type
Huh.
of Hans device.
Wow. All
Yeah.
right. Very good. Okay.
But yeah. So I IndyCar is completely separate. But correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't F1 used to race in Indianapolis like way back in the day, or no?
Yeah, well, F1's been all over the world. So, yeah, IndyCar essentially became what it was, and IndyCar fans are going to hate me for this, but
okay.
IndyCar became what it was because F1 became so popular. But F1's always been global.
Okay.
IndyCar is strictly U.S.-based tracks, and Indy cars have windshields now.
Oh.
They don't. So F1 keeps it open. There's no glass or anything in the car.
But the Indy cars have windshields.
Indy
So
cars have windshields.
did they ever were they ever the same thing and then split off, or were they always two separate things?
They
Indy
were always
and F1?
separate series.
Okay.
But a lot of F1 drivers,
Yeah.
even still to this day, a lot of F1 drivers, when they
Yeah.
leave F1, go race IndyCar.
Oh. Okay. Interesting. And they don't reach the speeds that F1s do.
No.
Huh.
Not.
They top out at 15 miles an hour. that footage is actually all sped up. Yeah, because the races actually take 13 hours, but you just
That's why you see people in the background walking really fast. You know, it's like
yeah, and
it's like
they
a
eat
Benny Hill-
hamburgers in 2 bites. Yeah. Yeah, Charlie
Wow.
Chaplin is actually seen in a lot of them doing his little dance and his hat's falling off.
How did we get there? Okay.
I don't know. No,
wow. Okay.
So-
So yeah.
so no,
they did.
they've always been separate series.
Yeah.
And what IndyCar was trying to capitalize on was how popular F1 was around the world.
Okay.
But they needed a place to start, and they wanted to do oval tracks as well.
Oh. Okay.
F1,
Do they still do that? F1 still do oval or no?
F1 doesn't have any oval
Okay,
tracks
that's what I
anymore.
I meant to ask you that because we actually just recorded an episode of your podcast, Redline Resorts.
Shout out to
find it
our-
on Spotify and YouTube and all the places you get
Well,
podcasts.
so name it again. Say it again.
It's we call it the RLR podcast.
Okay. All right.
The company name is Redline Resorts. It's something that my friend Matt and I, who's the co-host
Yeah.
of the podcast, and I have been working on for a little while. But the RLR podcast is we use your main sponsor Anchor
Right. Good.
to,
yes.
to
Absolutely.
distribute
good.
our
Good.
podcast as well.
So,
But
yeah.
I meant to ask you that
Mhm.
because we were talking about one of the races in 2021 had a banked turn, and I was
Right.
curious to see what you guys would think
yeah.
if F1 decided to come to either an oval track or like a Daytona type setup where it transitions onto the oval, then goes to road course, then back
Ooh,
onto
that
the
would
oval.
be interesting.
Which
So-
I have heard those transitions are horrible.
Really?
Going from banked turns onto a road track,
Yeah.
because the Milwaukee
It-
Mile is a
It
track.
messes with your suspension
It's-
real bad because
It's like hitting a curb.
Wow.
It's bad.
yeah.
I want to see one where the bank is like vertical, like it's 90
That's
degrees.
that's
or
a,
That
whatever.
exists.
those
What?
exist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you
Like
serious?
speed rings and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No way. Where
Da-
it actually is
Daytona,
like vertical, like a
Indianapolis.
90?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've got
Congrats,
some
you
steep
invented something that exists. That's really cool.
Wow. Thanks.
Yeah. Not Top Gear. Ugh,
Right.
Dead naming.
Yep.
Grand Tour did a
Grand
bit
Tour.
with an Aston Martin DB4
Yeah.
all the way up on the side.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really
Pretty
cool. Yeah.
But
But I would say I don't think F1 would ever go to that,
mhm.
only because bank turns just made a reappearance in F1 this season.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, really? Yeah.
maybe it was a season or two ago, but Zandvoort in the Netherlands is really the only track, or has been the only track, that had a banked turn, and then they added one to Abu Dhabi this year, down in the UAE.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So that-
banked
okay,
corners
wow.
used to be that's like kind of like a 50s thing.
Really?
Because there's
Yeah.
an abandoned racetrack north of us.
Yeah.
Remember that racetrack I took you to?
Yeah,
It's
Raceway Woods.
Raceway Woods. It's now a walking path.
Okay.
Which we should definitely go there sometime.
Oh yeah,
it's
that'd be fun. That'd be
It's a
good. That'd be
legit
cool.
race. It's a 3.5 mile racetrack
Yeah.
that was abandoned and is now
Yeah.
just a forest preserve.
But is it like
Um,
NASCAR on banked tracks?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so NASCAR remains on bank tracks, and then a lot of the tracks that NASCAR runs are the ones that IndyCar runs.
Oh. Okay.
So that's the tie-in there. Is the American Series racing like their ovals? They like their oval transition tracks,
Okay.
and they like their American road courses. And American road courses are very different than
Very
European
Are they?
or F1 style road
Okay.
courses. Excuse me.
I feel like American road courses. I don't know. They're very different. They're a lot more momentum based, I believe.
Yeah.
Where
Wider turns,
Okay.
not a ton of hairpins. Circuit of the Americas is.
but that was built specifically for F1.
It wasn't though, because it was really built for moto.
That's true.
Well,
But
Coda's a gnarly track.
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
the runoffs for Miata were last year, or maybe 2 years ago.
but outside of that, so take the closest, I guess, internationally recognized one by us, which is Road America.
Yeah.
Road America doesn't have really any. They've got what, turn 5?
Turn 5 is pretty rough, yeah. But it's a 90 degree. It's not even a hairpin.
Yeah, it's not a
just-
hairpin. It's just a 90 degree.
Oh. Okay.
So, and there's a huge, I call it a curving straight, but it's a long, essentially straight path with a little bit of a curve to it
Okay.
that leads into this long braking area into the 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
You'll get tracks in F1, and you saw in the documentary, and I'm sure you'll definitely see it in Drive to Survive, where these guys will be approaching turns at 200 miles an hour, and it's like a 160-degree hairpin where you are turning almost
So
all
it's
the way
Lakeshore
around.
Drive. It's Lakeshore Drive for those people in Chicago. Yeah.
Basically, it's
So-
lower
no,
whacker
no,
is
it's
what it
lower-
really
Oh,
is.
yeah, honestly.
Well, So, but okay. So, but to this movie, I
Yeah.
didn't even ask you
Mhm.
what you thought of it or what
Um,
your response was.
So I
Well,
grew
Nick,
up.
you saw some of it too. At least.
yeah, and I actually went back last night and watched the first half after
Oh,
I
good.
went
Okay.
upstairs, but
Okay.
I grew up knowing the Michael Schumacher name.
Yeah.
Really from that Lego set, 100%.
Wow.
I probably, God, this must have been 2004, 2005 when he was
Yeah.
having the end of his championship run.
Yeah.
He was a household name, at least for me.
Yeah. So that's so weird that it wasn't even to me.
But
it
I didn't
wasn't
even
that big of a
know
deal.
the rules of F1. I couldn't
Yeah.
name you a single team in F1
Yeah.
besides Ferrari. And they, of course, have that quote. I think they go over it in Drive to Survive, but Enzo Ferrari's quoted as saying, "You ask a kid to draw a car and he'll color it red." Like the Ferrari is
okay,
the
yeah,
most
yeah.
famous of the cars.
Yeah. True.
And so I knew a little bit about Michael Schumacher. I knew his son Mick Schumacher is now in F1.
Yes.
Um,
Right.
and I knew obviously how the documentary was going to end because he had the tragic accident in
Right.
2013.
Yeah.
But I didn't know a whole lot else. I didn't know he was right behind Senna when he crashed. I didn't know a whole lot of other things. So it was very fun to watch this documentary. I did learn a fair amount. We'll talk about it in a second. I think there was one crucial part that was left out that I would have liked to have seen in the movie.
Really? What
Um,
was that?
The race where his mother passed away.
Oh my gosh.
That was one of the things that I was going to bring up if you guys didn't. And I did and pardon me because it's going to seem like I didn't watch it. The documentary didn't really bring up Ralph very much, did
Not
it?
at all.
Who's
Okay,
Ralph?
okay. His brother.
His
It was
brother
all-
raced
Oh
in F1.
well, yeah, but kind of a little bit.
His brother was an F1 driver who was on the podium with him many times.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
And
Ralph
okay.
Schumacher is his brother.
Interesting. They didn't bring him.
So
up,
what
yeah.
happened was Schumacher's mom was very ill.
Okay.
And she was living back in Germany, I believe, or maybe the Swiss Alps or something.
Yeah, I think it was Germany near
Wherever.
the Swiss border.
So the
Okay.
two Schumacher brothers are racing together.
yeah.
They practice and qualify, fly home
to visit with her.
to
because
visit with her,
she's
to
on
be
her
with her
deathbed.
for like
Wow.
8 hours.
Yeah.
they fly back for the race. So like between qualifying and the race, they
Wow.
fly back to Germany or wherever
Wow.
she was living, fly back for the race. And then I believe before the race started,
It was
Yeah.
it was about 20 minutes before the lights went out at the race. They found out that their mother passed.
Wow.
they both podiumed that race.
Yeah.
So Ralph got third, Schumacher won. And it was, I
my
believe the
gosh.
only time they didn't play the national anthem. They didn't do the champagne. It was just like they just handed him the trophy. He waved, and that was it.
And
Well-
they left immediately and
Yeah.
got on a
Yeah.
flight to go home.
Yeah.
I think they did the same thing though when Cena was in the race where he nailed the wall. They
When-
didn't. I don't
when
remember
Senna
them.
died.
Yeah, when
Yeah, Senna
yeah.
died. I don't think they played the anthem. They just everyone kind of just
if
stood
a,
at the
if
podium.
a driver passes,
yeah.
Well,
normally
no, they did play the anthem.
Did
I
they?
remember because they didn't know that he died yet. He was escorted out. They restarted the race. They
Okay.
they didn't know that Senna died until later, which,
Okay.
from what I've also heard, Senna died on impact.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it-
it wasn't like there
Okay.
wasn't much guessing, but I assume the formalities of taking him off track.
Yeah. They also
and-
said though that if someone dies on the track, they end the race completely, right?
yeah, they
So
well, if they die on track and it's from what I've heard,
Mhm.
and I haven't dug deep enough into this story to be an expert on it. But
Okay.
from what I've heard, when the Senna crash happened,
Mhm.
they thought there was a chance they could bring him back.
Oh,
So they
okay.
got him off. They helicoptered him
Got-
out
yeah,
of there.
I saw that. In the
Thought
movie, yeah.
thought that they could bring
Yeah.
him back.
because he was unconscious, but I think,
Yeah.
well, because in the documentary, getting back to it, Schumacher
Yeah.
kept saying he's in a coma. People
Right.
pull out of comas
Right.
all the time.
Right. He didn't think it was
And-
a big deal.
Yeah. From
Schumacher
what
didn't
I've
think it
read,
was a
like
big
his
deal.
neck snapped like instantly, which
Okay.
seeing. By the way, if you're queasy with crash footage,
Yeah.
they do show the Senna crash,
Yes.
and you can see his head wiggling around, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
he's not alive.
No.
yeah.
So it is
it's-
kind of
it's-
spooky.
It is.
Also, something I totally forgot to say at the beginning of the podcast, which now we're 21 minutes in.
Yeah.
If you do have a big issue with subtitles, there's a lot of different languages.
That's true.
lot of
That's
German,
true. It was
and-
kind of rough at some points.
A lot of
to
German,
watch.
some French, some Italian.
I didn't find it nearly as rough as the initial D movie because I think German and
okay.
Italian are just slower languages.
Okay.
Well, I think honestly Japanese is just such a fast language
Well,
where
it is.
like,
It's true.
it
It's true, yeah.
flashes the subtitle at you.
But I'm sorry. So before we go on with that, I mean, we're
Yeah.
going to talk about Cena or Senna. Or
Senna.
Senna.
Senna,
So
yeah.
we'll talk about Senna in the movie too. But getting back to that whole thing about their mom dying and
Mhm.
they both podiumed, that's pretty incredible. I'm surprised they didn't.
That was
talk
my
about
big
that in
thing.
the
I was
movie.
like, they
I-
didn't even touch on it.
That's very weird to me. But
That seems like that deserve. Here's my thing.
okay.
I think this should have been a mini series.
yeah, probably.
I think that it should have been done in chunks.
yeah.
Honestly, I would have enjoyed 8 hours of this if
Yeah.
it were broken up into chunks and they could have focused a little bit more, because there was also another point where they were like, he won this championship next
Yeah.
year. Okay, yeah, he
right.
won that championship
No-
too.
Yeah, no kidding.
And there wasn't really, it didn't dive as deep as I would have liked
Yeah.
to, but of course,
True.
for a regular documentary, anything longer than the 2 hours
Yeah.
it already was would have been
Yeah.
mind numbing.
So again, I think it's speculation on my end.
yeah, okay.
I don't think Corinna likes Ralph. I think that's probably part of the reason why that
okay.
was not. And Ralph
Corinna
wasn't.
is his,
Corinna is his
Michael
Schumacher's
Schumacher's
wife.
Yeah.
wife. Yeah. So
Interesting.
I
Okay.
don't think because
Interesting.
Mick is very close to his uncle as well,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and Ralph has been to races. I believe has been to races this year.
Has Mick's mom not?
I don't believe she has.
I mean, I would understand that being hard to watch. Your son
Sure,
following
yeah,
in the
yeah.
footsteps of your husband, who is, for all intended purpose, incapacitated
Yeah.
for the last 8 years.
Right.
But that's very interesting. Also, another thing that I would have liked to have seen, again, if they had made this a miniseries, was Michael Schumacher's relationship with Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah,
Because
they were very close, and
very close. And Sebastian Vettel is in this documentary for 2 sentences.
two seconds.
Who is Sebastian?
He was
Vettel?
the German in the green shirt at the end of the documentary who was in there literally for 2 sentences after they talked to Mick.
So he's still a
Okay.
driver on
Yeah.
the F1 circuit. He
Okay.
was Schumacher and him were very close. They're both German.
Oh, okay.
And Michael Schumacher would like go to Vettel's karting events, like coached him
Oh,
through
wow.
karting,
Wow.
like really, really brought him up, which is really cool because now Michael Schumacher's son Mick is on the grid.
Yeah.
And Sebastian Vettel's kind of like a mentor to him.
Yeah, he's
as
kind of doing
his
the same
dad
as
was
what
to
Michael
him.
did to him. He's doing to Michael's son.
So which is cool. So when you say on the grid, what do you mean by the grid?
So they're not on the same team.
Currently racing in F1 is
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
When you're on the grid, that means
Okay.
you are a first or second position driver at a team in F1.
Okay.
It just means you're one of the racers in the F1 series right now.
Gotcha.
Because technically this year, Alex Albon, who was on a team last year,
Mm-hmm.
is an F1 driver, but he's the reserve driver, so he's not on the grid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a reserve driver. Okay. All right.
So, but yeah, so I would have liked to have seen that relationship. But
Yeah.
getting back to my feelings on the documentary,
Yeah.
incredibly emotional documentary. I cried
Yeah.
at a couple points.
Yeah.
When Vettel showed up, like, I knew the voice before they showed Vettel's
Yeah.
face, and
Yeah.
he's one of my favorite drivers ever.
Really?
Probably
Vettel
my
is?
favorite driver in the
he's-
world. That was just super emotional for me. I teared up at that point. And when Mick came on screen, his son, because
Yeah.
they waited to the very
Yeah.
end to show his son coming on, who's now racing in F1.
Yes, right,
And
yeah.
when he was talking about how he wished he could share that experience with his dad, and he knows he never will.
Yeah.
That was a tearjerker. That was hard. You know.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Well-
I mean, it was.
Well, and it's interesting because inside into that whole thing
Mhm.
with Mick, his son, Mick's number that he's chosen, because every driver gets to choose their number as long as it's not already taken on the grid.
Oh, okay.
Mick's number is an anagram for Michael. So it's 47 because he was a 7-time world champion. His
Oh,
number's
okay.
47,
Okay.
47
So it's for
Michael.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
every single day that Mick is driving that car on the grid, the front of his car says "for my dad."
Yeah. Okay.
Which
Very
is
cool.
very, very unique.
See,
But
now that would have been really cool for me if they would have.
that's what I was saying.
So,
Like,
yeah.
and I really did love this documentary. I don't want to sound like
Yeah, it was a
I'm
good documentary.
bad-mouthing it.
It was a good
Um,
documentary.
But I almost wish it was longer, honestly,
Yeah.
or broken up into parts.
Yeah, I think it would have been, to me, being outside of the whole thing, it would have been cool if it was maybe broken up, but also then maybe if they brought in some of the vernacular and stuff from racing and try to, would teach
Yeah.
people about it.
That's
and
what
the
I
other
was gonna
drivers and things
say
like
is
that,
that
yeah.
a sweet spot.
Yeah.
I think I'm in the sweet spot of
Okay.
this documentary where I
Yeah.
didn't know, because if you know Michael Schumacher's whole story, this
Yeah.
kind of didn't offer any new info.
Right. Yes.
But I knew enough about F1, so when they talk about the grid and they talk about like getting a podium
Yeah.
is just third place or above,
Yeah.
that's that's
Yeah.
important info that you would want to know.
Sure.
And the sort of team dynamics and the fact that people switch teams, because like, as a kid, I always thought like, oh, you're on this team and then that's it the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But there's contracts and teams and championships
Right.
and,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So I think I was at the sweet spot where I think it would have been beneficial for you to probably watch a season of Drive to Survive
Probably,
before
yeah.
watching this.
Probably, yeah.
So to kind of get, because F1 has changed a lot, but not,
Mhm.
it's not completely foreign to what
Yeah.
it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And
That's
so, I definitely,
Yeah.
if you're not familiar with some verbiage in
Right.
F1, this might be a little
And
over your head.
For me, though, it's funny that you, and the fact that you said that you had gotten emotional when at certain parts. Unfortunately, I mean, this is going to make me sound like a stone cold jerk. But,
You are. Go ahead.
but I didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
I saw these people as being very much people, and so it's like any person. And there's one thing in the very first episode of Drive to Survive, and again, I'm going to mix these two, but
Yeah.
they're talking about, well, that's what makes these guys like aircraft, like jet pilots, unlike us mere mortals. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, these people are not gods. They are not.
Drive to Survive does have a holier than thou
Right, yeah.
mentality. And that's the other thing that I really liked about this documentary is the fact that there are a lot of F1 drivers are egomaniacs.
Oh yeah.
Through and through. Even today, a lot
yeah.
of people on the grid have insane egos that are larger than any hot air balloon. But
Yeah.
And
The movie
that's not
Rush.
true.
What did I say
well,
that?
but,
Okay.
and,
yeah,
and
you
that was
talk-
kind of the status quo.
right. Okay.
And we were talking about this earlier. I don't think anyone has been as successful on the grid as Michael Schumacher
True.
and been
Yeah.
so personable off the grid.
Well, yes, that they showed that in this documentary.
Because Senna,
they showed it.
Senna is one of the greatest ever.
Yeah.
But if you watch interviews with him, he only cares about driving, and he can tell the rest of the world to F off.
Yeah,
Right.
he well, and in many cases he did.
Yeah, and
He-
he doesn't sound like someone. We always use the term like, "Would you want to get a beer with him?" I would have
Right.
loved to have gotten a beer with Schumacher.
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
when he
yeah.
was in his championship days,
Sure.
and pre-accident,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
But Senna, I don't think I would gain anything from a conversation with him. He just seems so close-minded, and it's the same with Fangio. It's the same with Prost. It's the same with any name you can enter there from F1. So it was interesting to see this
Yeah,
guy
it
was
is,
really he also came from nothing. Where a lot
True,
of these European F1 drivers were,
Yeah.
oh, dad has $80 million. I like fast cars.
Right.
Let's
Yeah.
travel the world and drive fast cars.
And
Yeah.
and that's still a lot of the grid today.
Is it?
there-
Yeah.
It's no secret
I-
that the Strolls
Yeah,
only
shout out
own
to Lance
Aston Martin.
Stroll.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sh-
All right. Well, that's the thing. I
shout
mean, I
out to
don't
Lance
And then no
no,
shout
no
out to
shout out.
Lance
No,
Stroll.
no shout out.
Guy looks like a gremlin.
Son of a. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're just gonna get
No
this
shout
together.
out to Lance or his dad,
Yeah.
even though they pretty much own Aston Martin now.
Yeah, well, the joke is Lawrence Stroll bought Aston Martin for his son's Christmas gift.
He literally bought. That's the other thing is that there are still people that buy their way into the grid.
Okay.
As we
Mazepin.
saw this season with
oh, okay. Mazepin or whatever.
Yes,
I-
thank you. For
Yeah.
was it Antonio?
Giovinazzi?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
from Alfa Romeo, lost his seat to a Chinese driver for 2022
Yeah.
because the Chinese driver's dad is like, what, a billionaire? Like,
Yeah, he
Oh.
like he's
okay.
partial owner of Alibaba or something. So
All
he's
right.
like,
So,
here, have
I'm surprised.
$80 billion or whatever to go
I'm
put my
surprised-
son in the
I'm
seat.
surprised Jeff Bezos isn't somewhere in here. And
I
Jeff
would-
Bezos' kids aren't old enough yet.
Okay.
well,
So they will be
yeah.
then, huh? Okay.
It would be very interesting if an American billionaire bought in and could bring the money that.
Well, they could bring the money,
Well,
but
Gene Haas tried.
who's
Yeah,
Ge-
but who's Gene Haas besides Haas?
Oh,
owner?
Haas. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
If
Yeah,
Jeff
that's true.
Bezos or Elon Musk bought into it,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we would actually have a shot at an American team. But
yeah, it would. Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
I
if they
legitimately
weren't
was-
shooting rockets into space and
Yeah.
orbiting the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Anyway, so-
getting back to it, that's something I really liked is that I'm sure it could have been very biased, this documentary, but it really did seem like, oh, he
Yeah.
was actually like someone that, when he
Yeah.
came from nothing, he
Yes.
talked about how
Yeah.
he loved winning
Yep.
with the worst parts.
Yep.
He would go take tires out of the trash and win races with
Right.
them.
right.
I think that really creates a very particular person.
And it wasn't that Michael was without his hot-headed moments. He-
Oh,
he
Oh,
100%,
clearly-
definitely.
yeah.
They show that
yeah,
in the movie. It's
He had his hot-headed moments.
Yeah.
He had his what would be embarrassing moments.
Yeah, he did.
But,
But again, they showed that too. It
Yeah, they
wasn't,
did.
It wasn't very
Right.
biased one way or the other. But I think at the end of the day,
well, they right, exactly. They showed it, and then they showed him being super nice to people.
Yeah.
Like, they talked about him being the first one to get there in the morning, last one to leave,
yeah,
and working on the car with the mechanics, and even the guy who was serving pasta,
yeah,
telling the guy, "Hey, this is the best pasta ever. You're the best cook."
yeah.
And that was a tremendous thing. And they said he built up the teams.
You know what bothered me though?
What?
This is such a small detail, but in the interview, they used that. They're like, "Oh yeah, the guy making pasta, best
Yeah.
pasta." Then they showed a clip of him getting ice cream, and I'm like, "That's not pasta. It's not pasta."
Wait a minute.
But no, I mean
What
that
the
was.
yeah,
but,
having too
yeah,
much
no.
fun
I
with
mean,
it, but-
we have the soundboard. So this is the second show with the soundboard.
Yeah,
by the
wow,
way.
we're really breaking
Yeah.
it in.
Which go ahead.
No,
Okay,
I was
okay,
just
sorry,
saying,
sorry.
kind of wrapping up
But
my
yeah.
thoughts. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think I was glad the amount of backstory I did have. That's why I was able to get emotional.
Yeah. Yeah,
the
that's
most
good.
emotional moment was when Vettel's voice came on, and I'm like, I
Really?
know that voice.
Wow.
I know,
That's
and then
really
it
cool.
showed
That's-
him, and I was
yeah.
like, oh man.
So what Michael did was make the drivers personable.
Okay.
So he was the kind of the image of what the driver should be.
Oh, okay. All right.
He was the
That's
7
good.
time.
Yeah.
He was the world
Yeah.
champion 7 times. He held the record, but he was still personable off the track.
Yeah.
He didn't take what was on the track off the track most of the time.
Most. Yeah. Okay. Most of the
I
time.
mean, I
There's
understand.
some-
It's
most-
hard to.
It's hard
everything
sometimes.
Yeah.
But he was a family man. He made sure that his family was well taken care of. Social media wasn't around when
Right.
Michael was in
Yeah.
his prime.
Right.
But if it was, he probably wouldn't have been a big user of it.
No, probably not. I
The
would-
biggest thing to me, one wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Married
too. Very
and
true. Very
I don't
true,
think there
very
was
true.
any affair
So-
allegations
Yeah.
or.
That's where I was going with this. Is
Yeah.
when he mentored Sebastian Vettel,
Right.
as he's affectionately known on the grid as Seb.
Seb.
Yeah,
Okay. Seb.
Sebastian
Okay.
Vettel. Yeah.
I got
So when he brought up Seb married his high school girlfriend. He's never been on Seb has never been on social media.
Wow.
His
Okay.
kids.
He has one now. I don't think it's ran by him though.
No, it's
Okay.
entirely because of the team. The team's requirement was that they had social medias.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay.
run by a social media person, but it's not him. He doesn't use social media. He's not like outwardly advocating any one way, shape, or form. When he does do something, it's for charity or for profit
Oh,
or for
wow, that's
awareness.
pretty darn-
Actually,
pretty darn
Seb
cool.
does
Yeah.
advocate for a lot,
He
but
he does.
It's
Yeah.
always like on track.
Well-
Like he was wearing an what was it? He wore a Black Lives Matter shirt, and then like
He did
um,
wear that. He wore
in a-
the LGBTQ plus.
You're talking
uh,
about. You're talking
this
about
is Seb.
Seb. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Seb.
who's
Yeah,
still
all right.
currently racing.
Okay. Yeah.
He wore LGBTQ plus stuff,
Okay. Cool.
equal rights stuff in countries where like Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
Oh,
where
wow.
they will
Okay,
literally
wow.
cut your head
Yeah.
off.
All right. Well, it's,
So Seb organized a race, a
Yeah.
go-kart race that was women only in Saudi Arabia.
wow, that's cool.
They've only had the ability to drive for 5 years, and they still have to
Wow.
have their sponsors in the passenger seat or
Real-
whatever.
Wow, jeez.
But it's go-karts, so
Yeah, okay.
it was only them, and he organized
right.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
well, that's pretty darn
So-
cool. It's pretty cool.
I will say that the
Yeah.
new crop of F1 drivers is very interesting, and they seem to be relatively personable people. I think a lot in due to like Lando. I think of because Lando,
yeah.
like he streams on Twitch in his free time.
This-
Lando
is the one-
Calrissian, he was in Star
Yes.
Wars.
Like-
not that Lando.
Hit the censor button.
Okay,
Hit the
it's
censor.
just-
Clear
all right.
the air. Yeah, that
Okay,
was
here we go.
terrible.
All right,
That's
so
awful.
But like a lot of these newer guys on the grid, they're
Yeah.
like 21, 22 years old,
oh,
and like you
that's
could
okay.
play video games together. Like it, I don't know. It just seems like they're better
Yeah.
friends, like Alex Albon and Lando and Charles.
I mean,
and
during COVID, I got into a race with Lando online. Like he was holding
Like,
an
for
event.
real?
Yeah,
Wow.
in the F1 video game.
yeah,
He was holding an event
wow,
on Twitch.
That's
and
pretty cool.
I waited for
You
like
could
2
do it,
hours
yeah.
waiting in the lobby, and I got
Yeah.
randomly picked, and I got to do a 4-lap race with an F1 driver
Wow.
in the game.
Wow.
so all of this being said,
Yeah.
I think this was all kicked off by Schumacher because the kids, well, they are still kids. They're 19,
Yeah.
20 years old in F1 now.
Younger
They
than you
grew up
guys. I mean,
looking
that's
up to Schumacher.
Yeah.
A lot of
Right.
the older guys, they looked up to Prost and they looked up to Senna and all this stuff, like, to be the best. But I think the cultural influence of an F1 driver was all started by Michael. That he was
well,
this sort of
that's-
level headed that if you are the best on the track, you
Mm-hmm.
need to be the best off the track too when it comes to being personable and fighting for the things you believe in and
Yeah.
all this stuff. Where back in the day, you would win a race and then you'd go have a cigar, drink whiskey,
yeah. Well-
tell your wife to F off
Right.
and go to bed,
Well, or in Kimi Räikkönen's case, if your car breaks down in the middle of the Monaco Grand Prix, you just leave it in the middle of the track and go get on some random person's yacht and party with
That
them.
was his yacht, I thought.
Was it?
I don't know if it was his yacht or if it was
what you just
someone's
described
yacht,
as the entire movie of Rush and the reason why I didn't
Exactly,
like it. So,
exactly.
because it wasn't, and I'll say this a million times. The reason why Rush to me was an awful movie was I could not relate to any of the characters, and so to me they were people that were in outer space. They were
Yeah.
people that I could not relate to at all, and that's why I didn't like the movie. So, but yeah, I mean, but who was the one guy we were talking about? Hakkinen?
Mika Häkkinen?
Mika Häkkinen?
Yeah.
Häkkinen.
Häkkinen.
Häkkinen actually seemed like a really cool guy because he was in a super fast car.
Yeah.
Well, and Häkkinen was very humbled by Michael too.
Yeah, I think so. But Häkkinen knew he was really fast in a better car than Michael, and yet at the end he was celebrating with him. You see this in the
Yeah.
documentary. So really, really cool.
Yeah, I really truly feel like that sort of effect and that sort of mentality was not pioneered necessarily by Michael to be a good person, but I think definitely it was brought into the limelight.
Well, yeah,
like we talked
definitely,
about
yeah.
off air earlier, there were people in F1 that were nice. Like it's not
Oh,
like
I'm sure.
everyone before Michael was not, but
Right.
someone that was so successful
Right.
and so nice.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was someone in that crossroad.
Well, and it like you said before too, and they showed this in the movie that when he was racing, he was laser focused,
Yeah.
and it was like nothing but racing, winning. That was it. Number one, obviously, that was the most important thing.
Yeah.
But anytime they showed him afterwards, after a race or on his own with his friends, they're out snowmobiling, they're out
Yeah.
having fun. It was all about enjoying family and friends and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And it was like they said he was a totally different person. There was a business race car driver, and then there was, him separately.
And what's interesting now is I went onto IMDb to look up any trivia on this,
Right,
and there
exactly.
was none.
We usually do
Literally,
that, yeah.
the only trivia
Right.
was that Michael Schumacher won 7 world titles, and I'm like, that's just a movie.
That's like yeah.
But recommended on IMDb was
Right.
the Senna documentary.
Oh,
and I'm
there's
very,
a Senna
there
documentary.
is.
Oh wow, interesting.
Yeah, and
I'm-
I've seen the Senna documentary.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah.
I would get through Drive to Survive, at least a season of it before
Okay.
you get in, because I would
Okay,
say
all
that
right.
one's more technical than this.
Okay.
movie
All right.
was.
Good. Well,
But-
that's good to know
Yeah.
then.
But I'd be
yeah.
very curious to watch that and see what
All
kind
right.
of light he's
Yeah,
painted in.
that would be
Um,
interesting. Yeah.
But let me grab
Okay.
my notes here
All right.
real
Yeah.
quick.
While you're doing that, I'm just going to ask Nick. Did the Indy cars sound like this? No, those are F1s. That's
Yeah,
F1.
I can tell you exactly which year and,
What?
and
Jeez,
cars
what?
those were.
Really?
I can almost 100% guarantee you
Mm-hmm.
that those were the screaming V8s from the Ferraris. From the, I would say it was obviously the V8 era. But-
This was at the very beginning of the movie. This actually was a clip from the movie.
So definitely Ferrari.
it was definitely Ferrari,
Yeah.
but it
And
was
I
definitely
would
in
say
the
like
beginning.
the 2004 range.
Right,
because-
it was very, very early.
Speaking of
Which is very different than this sound.
which era is that, Nick?
that is 100% the Mach 5.
That is the
That
Mach
is
5.
the Mach 5. Very good. That's a
Um,
Mach 5.
Speaking of the
Very
intro to the
different.
movie,
Yeah.
though,
Yeah.
I mean, it was just pure in-car footage.
Yeah.
I don't even think there was any music. Was
No,
there?
it was very, and it wasn't even like good in-car footage. It was no, but I mean, I don't mean that in a bad
It
way.
was
I
raw.
think
It wasn't
was raw.
cut. It wasn't
Right.
montaged.
And it was nothing.
just in-car footage. What looks
Yeah.
like Monaco, maybe Brazil.
Yeah,
I
it
couldn't
looked
tell.
like it looked kind of like Monaco.
It was a street
definitely-
circuit.
Yeah, street.
And I thought that was a really cool intro.
was-
And then they ended with the same footage.
yeah,
I felt like that kind of gave it a Michael's still racing wherever
yeah,
his mind might
Right.
be.
right,
The
exactly.
only, speaking of which, the only other note that I had
right.
was I did not realize that he returned to Mercedes 4 years after retiring.
Yes.
yeah,
that
but
was
they showed that.
very
They showed
interesting.
that in the documentary, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Okay,
saying. Is
yeah.
I didn't know that about Michael until I watched the documentary.
Yeah,
Well, he returned to Mercedes, but when he was originally at Mercedes, it was McLaren Mercedes.
Right, but I'm saying in 2010.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that is
and-
interesting.
His wife made a point that Michael now racing, he didn't have the stress of trying to be world champion.
Right.
So he could enjoy F1 in a different way. And that was just so interesting to
It
me.
is
that, like,
interesting. Yeah.
he was like, oh, because he ended up finishing, like, I think it was 9th his first season with Mercedes and then 13th, which is, like, near the bottom of the 20 drivers.
Uh,
But that's
from Mercedes-
exactly how Kimi Räikkönen is
yeah.
and has been with this. I mean, Kimi Räikkönen just retired at the end of last season. But he was on the record as being Kimmy, this is just my hobby, Raikkonen.
Really?
He
Okay.
couldn't
wow.
care.
Yeah.
I mean, he really he
To the
All
point
right,
where
was it-
he retired this year or
Yeah.
last season, and they like did like a special sticker on the side of his Alfa Romeo race car, and it just says, "Kimmy, we will leave you alone now."
Really?
well because
Yeah.
he'd be driving and they'd be like, "All right, the car in front of you is 0.2 of a second faster each lap," and he'd just go, "Shut up and let me
He
drive."
literally just enjoyed driving an F1 car. He also
wow.
his average
Yeah.
interview length was
Yeah.
45 seconds.
Yeah.
Really?
He would not talk to press.
Wow.
And Sebastian Vettel, Seb, they were asking him a question. One of the interviewers was like, who on the grid would you want to have as a baking partner? And he was like, Kimmy, he'd leave me alone.
Wow.
That
wow.
and then they
That's hilarious.
at the beginning of this season, or well, I guess it was right after Kimmy was announced that he was retiring.
Yeah.
They asked everybody, they're like, "What's what are you gonna miss most about, Kimmy being gone?" And everybody just sat there in silence. And then Seb goes, "Yeah, exactly that. The awkward silences."
Silence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in this movie, they talked about the fact that he didn't have the pressures anymore.
Uh-huh.
He didn't have to prove himself. He, after 20 years, got Ferrari a title, basically.
Yeah.
Won them.
Who hasn't really won a whole lot since?
But still,
I believe
Yeah.
there's other reasons behind that.
by the way, very, very important. Did the movie Cars ever mention Michael Schumacher?
Yes.
Don't they mention him?
Yeah, in the original car, I've never seen 2 and 3. I've heard your podcast on it,
Yeah.
so I kind of have an understanding of
Well,
what happens.
Michael Schumacher's in the movie.
Is he?
Yeah, he comes in as a Ferrari. He drives
2010,
in.
so it's before the accident.
Oh, okay. All right. yeah.
Well, 2013 was the accident. Cars was in 2006.
Was it 2006?
It was
yeah,
early. Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Holy
But-
smokes! I didn't
Yep.
realize
At
that
the
Cars. I thought that
very-
was 2010.
Yep.
At the very, very end of Cars 1,
Yeah.
after Lightning, spoiler alert for Cars 1, after the race with the King and Lightning
Yeah.
McQueen, and he doesn't win the Piston Cup.
He doesn't.
But it was the friendships he learned along the
Yeah,
way.
Right. Exactly.
There's a
yes.
Ferrari that pulls into Luigi's tire shop.
Yes.
And it's Michael Schumacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
Okay,
then
so-
Luigi goes,
Ferrari.
yeah,
In my tire
Ferrari
shop.
in my shop. And then Guido
Yeah.
goes, pit stop.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
um,
yeah.
But yes, and which is funny because then in the other movies, Sebastian Vettel was in Cars 3, the German version, not actually the English. You know
okay,
how in
yeah.
Cars 3 there's like that AI that they talk to.
Yes.
So for the U.S., we actually got Hamilton's voice, Lewis Hamilton.
Oh,
But
really?
in Germany, it was actually just voiced by Vettel, Seb.
Wow.
And she was like, "Oh, let's ask Seb," and it's like a completely different name and voice. And then
wow.
I think Seb also does the Italian one because Seb knows like 3 or 4 languages.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, he
That's
did.
cool.
He did that, and then I think Fernando Alonso did
Yeah,
the Spanish one. Yeah.
was
Wow.
Alonso, which
Well,
is funny because
yeah.
I saw him in the documentary. Michael's winning, and you see Alonso like walking in the background. I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about Alonso."
Wow.
he was
That's
he was
wild.
around in that time. But what are some other thoughts from you from someone sort of pulled out, an outside in sort of look at the
Well,
documentary?
I'm going to say something like this was 1,000 times more enjoyable to watch than Rush. So it was to me. I mean, to me, it was because I could relate to this guy. Here was a guy who was trying to do right by his family, who was working really hard. I think it was really fun. And obviously, I'm learning that almost everyone who starts in these races starts in go-karts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it
100%.
really is like, I didn't know that go-karts were that big of a deal. I thought they were just fun things.
And it's not like, oh, I get my license next year, let me try a go-kart. It's
Yeah.
like age 4, if you can reach pedals,
right.
you're starting to win championships.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
it
like,
is trial by fire.
Right. And I mean, obviously you're learning on the track. You can't, I mean, there's certain things that I'm sure your friends like Adam who would teach people how to drive.
Mhm.
You have to be in the driver's seat. You have to feel it. You
Yeah.
have to do it. You can't just tell someone how to do it. And there are things that, like, they talked about this several times, and they mentioned it not only in this movie but in Drive to Survive, about being one with the car.
Yeah.
You have to be one with the car, feel it completely, so you know how far you can push it.
Yeah.
That's the big thing to me. That's
Well, and something you brought up originally was
Yeah.
that these guys, they in Drive to Survive, they talk about them being like fighter pilots.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So there's been many
Do
people.
they have volleyball scenes on the?
It's
Oh,
not.
God,
It's not
no.
Top Gun.
Okay.
It is
All
not
right.
Top
Thank
Gun.
goodness
Yeah.
there's not volleyball scenes with. Yeah.
Although George Russell does have a lot of shirtless pictures on Instagram. But
Yeah,
we
they
won't
always
even
make
go
fun of
there.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the
That is-
drivers
that's
on the
pretty
grid
funny.
right now. Yeah.
That's pretty hilarious. Yeah. So
But-
anyway, but yeah.
But talking about them being like fighter pilots,
Yep.
these guys train like fighter pilots.
yeah.
And to put it in perspective, we just talked about it on our podcast. Max Verstappen, who's the current world champion,
Yeah.
had an impact at Silverstone, the race course. For those Americanized, it's Silverstone, but it's pronounced Silverstone.
Oh. Okay.
In Britain, it's pronounced Silverstone, so everybody calls it Silverstone. So,
okay.
but he was, in my opinion, pushed off track by Lewis Hamilton, and he hit the wall.
Yeah.
And as Zach did the math, instantly became 9,000 pounds. He had a 51 G impact.
51 G's.
51 G's. Yeah.
Holy
Yeah.
cow! How did he survive?
He survived. He had to go to the hospital, but he survived.
And he raced next week too. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't.
How could you do that?
So obviously the 51 G is just instantaneous.
Yeah.
And it has to be extended. I think someone broke it down. It was like you have to sustain those G's for more than half a second for it to be
Okay.
deadly.
Yeah.
But like 28 G's is deadly.
Yeah.
So sustained. But,
Okay.
But for the most part, I mean, it was an instantaneous 51 G's, and it only lasted like 1/1000th of a second or something.
Yeah.
But still, 51 G's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
He-
amazing.
So Zach said, if you weighed like 180 pounds, he weighed 9,000 pounds for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Close to my weight, by the way. Just want to let you know that. Just close.
Yeah.
Close.
But no, they train. If you watch some of the training videos, like they actually have a rig where it's attached to a weighted steering wheel, and they have to just turn it left to right, left to right.
Okay.
But I mean, the steering wheel, it looks like the steering wheel weighs like 500 pounds. Like they are using all their might. Just to
They're
turn left
literally
and right.
throwing their body into
Yeah.
it because you're fighting in some of these corners,
Yeah.
especially some of these banked corners.
Yeah.
You're fighting 4 or 5 G's coming through these
Oh,
corners.
well, yeah. I never thought about that.
And they do a lot of neck exercises. They
Yeah,
do
you'll
weights
see
on the
'em-
necks, and
you'll see 'em wear
F1
like a
drivers tend
cap.
to have pretty thick necks, just for
Okay.
the
Yeah.
G's of the car.
Huh.
Well,
Yeah.
and I can't remember who it was. There was a newscaster.
Shaquille O'Neal.
And it was not Shaquille O'Neal.
Who's-
He is a newscaster too. Wow, he does everything.
Shout out to Shaquille O'Neal.
Big shout out
And,
to
and
Shaquille
shout
O'Neal.
out to
Oh yeah,
Paul
shout out to
Shin
Craig Lieberman,
and
Paul
Paul Shin,
Shin,
yeah,
all of our
definitely, yeah.
usuals.
But sorry, no, I'm sorry. You were gonna say I didn't mean.
But he said, they put him out in a. It wasn't even like a Formula 1 car. It was like a Formula Renault, which is like the feeder series into Formula 3, then 2, then 1.
Oh really? Oh, okay.
But it's like a Formula Renault car. They threw him out on the track, and
Mm-hmm.
it was some closed track. And he's going around the turn, and he said, when I hit the brakes, he goes, the force was so incredible, I couldn't lift my head. So I was staring at my crotch while I was hitting the
wow.
brakes.
Wow.
Went through the turn, and as soon as I got back on the gas, my head snapped back up, and I could see again. And he goes, I went into the pits, and they said, wow, you hit 40% braking power. Almost nobody hits 40% braking power on their first turn. He goes, that was 40%? How much is everybody else hitting? Like, how much does an F1 driver?
Oh
They're
yeah,
like,
I remember.
oh,
this
they're
now.
hitting 100% almost every turn.
Yeah.
And he's like, I couldn't even lift my head.
Are you serious?
And these guys are fighting 4 Gs,
Wow.
4 or 5 Gs coming forward.
I remember flying in. This is related. I remember flying with Lima Lima, and we would
Yeah.
pull a lot of G's. I don't know how much, but we would pull a lot of G's doing some of the stunts. And I was in the airplane, and it was like the bizarre feeling of your body suddenly becoming super heavy is what it felt like.
Yeah.
And you're like, ugh, you're just like crushed. and fighting that was a difficult thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that was difficult to do.
Well, fighter pilots and F1 drivers both use that method where they squeeze their whole body together in the turns, and they fast exhale to try and keep the blood in their brain.
Yeah.
Because when you
Interesting,
pull
yeah.
through some of those turns,
Yep.
you can literally pass out. You can black out. So
Well, that would, and which is really crazy if you think about it. That they have the potential that they could easily black out, by going through that. That I didn't really realize that they had to fight that much.
that's why. Well, one, that's why they have the halos now.
Okay.
Because if you think about a 51G impact with nothing to protect your head,
that would be pretty awful.
and the highest recorded accident, I think, in modern F1 history, we're not talking about Senna or anyone from years past or Brabham or anything like that.
Yeah.
But in the sheer sense of modern F1, the highest recorded accident was 57 Gs.
Jeez.
And that was Roman Grosjean
Mm-hmm.
2 seasons ago
Yeah.
now. And he nearly died in that accident. I mean, his car split in half and immediately burst into flames.
Jeez. Wow.
He was in the flames for a full minute and a half.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was in the car on
And
fire.
trying to get out of his safety device, but the halo protected him, because if he hadn't had the halo there, the guardrail would have gone through his head.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it's all in Drive to Survive. They have some amazing shots. I don't want to spoil that scene for you till you get there, but it is rough to watch.
Yeah.
I had to take a break.
Well, I think that's all part of the fun mystique of F1. I don't want to say fun in a bad way. Fun by meaning there's a lot of psychological drama that's going on between the racers and stuff, but there's also potentially very, very scary stuff going on in the track, and all of that. And I guess in a way too, I guess I don't feel, especially being older, I don't feel like, okay, it's terrible, terrible, terrible if they get into an accident. But it's kind of like, you guys go out there knowing that. Like, it's not a surprise.
Yeah, a lot of them are very aware of that. And
That's why I say, to be in F1, you have to have a screw loose. I
Yeah,
mean, you're literally
I mean,
strapping yourself to a rocket ship. And, that's what,
Right.
My girlfriend and I talked about when we watched Drive to Survive. Is like, they do kind of upplay it of, like, we're really out there doing stuff. It's like, well, you kind of have that choice to make... You
do.
make big money, but
Right.
you are putting yourself at risk. Like, you kind of know that going into it.
To me, it's a lot like someone who says they're going to climb Mount Everest and they're going to be this free-form climber or whatever. It's like, that's cool if you want to do that, but I'm not going to be real sad for you if something happens. I mean, I would, but...
Right, but like you put yourself,
you
fully
out there.
put yourself in that. There's never been anyone walking through a forest and an F1 car just like takes them out. Like it's not like
Well,
it's not like a bear.
it's
attack.
not like the Mach 5 is randomly driving through forests.
You don't have the
with the
jack
blades.
sound, do you?
No, I got rid of the jack sound.
okay.
But chunk, chunk, chunk. But no, where he cuts.
They're
down the
putting
trees in the forest. But
themselves into the arena
they are,
of
absolutely.
danger. It's
Absolutely,
not like, but
And nowadays, I mean, Formula One is a lot safer. They've got like the Tech Pro barriers, which, take a 51G impact and essentially reduce the damage down to what would be a 9G impact.
That's the other thing is with that 51G impact that Max had last season. Not a single person in the crowd was even relatively near harm's way.
Really?
Where in the past, people have been killed watching F1.
Yes, people
Or
have
Group B rally.
Or especially Group B rally. There was no barriers on the side, so photographers would sit in the middle of the track until the last minute. Not even track; these were like back roads of Cambodia.
Oh my gosh!
And
Group B rally was nuts.
if we can find a good Group B rally documentary, I would love to watch that. There's like a 2-minute one on YouTube called The Killer Bees. Oh,
Where did Group B rally come from? Was that
So it was Group A without all the restrictions.
Oh gosh!
So literally, it was like,
so-
so Group A rally, like you're limited to it was like 400 horsepower or something.
Yeah.
Group B was like, if it fits under the hood, send it around a corner. Like
So-
it was people. So many people
nuts.
died. They canceled it after like 4 seasons.
So that was the Speed Racer races where it was the anything goes, any
100%.
car. You
yeah,
could
Group B was that way,
Okay.
but it was off road.
Oh yeah, this is rally driving.
So Speed Racer.
So this was like
So Speed
10
Racer.
miles across, like literally the backwoods of Cambodia.
Speed Racer.
or-
Yeah.
But a lot of cool engineering came out of Group B because
Yeah.
they just had so much freedom. But I watched a very short documentary. It was very common to find severed fingers, severed hands. Like when the mechanics were like, working on
jeez.
stuff, there would be like
Ugh.
fingers under the car that people had.
Ah.
Because literally there was no.
There was no barrier between the car and the spectator, so people would be like, "Oh, I'm going to reach out and touch it,"
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my god!
I have to
and that's
Imagine-
why there were hands
Oh
and
my
fingers.
gosh!
There was a couple Group B Rally RX-7s which were sick. They had a peripheral port 13B RX-7 that was 4-wheel drive.
Wow.
It made 300 horsepower naturally aspirated, no turbo, no nothing. It revved to 11,000 RPM and would just
Jeez.
scream.
I'm sure.
If
I'm
I
sure
could go
it
to
was-
any vintage race, like
Yeah.
in a time machine,
Yeah.
a Group B rally race with an
Okay.
FB RX-7
Yeah.
4-wheel drive through the woods, just hearing it echo off trees.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that would be a
Well,
good
it-
dream.
And
Group B is about as insane. Like F1 in relativity to Group B,
Yeah.
is child's play safe.
Yeah, like we're literally comparing like
Okay.
a Lego set to playing with knives.
Okay.
Like
100%.
and,
Wow.
and there's ditches on either side of the tracks.
and-
Car hits
and-
the ditch, flips over, kills 18 people. Like
Yeah, there's that. There's
Yeah.
that. Wow.
Have you seen the videos of like more recent rally cars that have fallen off of cliffs?
oh
And,
yeah,
and the people are just sitting there completely stone faced as they're just rolling over and over.
Yeah.
And
Oh my gosh.
rallying is very very dangerous.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
But anyway,
but anyway, going back to F1,
Mm-hmm.
F1 in the days of Senna and when Michael first started,
Yeah.
getting back to Michael as
Mhm.
well, was so dangerous.
Which I don't know why we never get off track.
oh God.
But yeah, it was so
I've been
dangerous.
on
It
this
was-
podcast twice,
I
and
know.
we've been so far off track twice.
So, yeah.
But yeah, it was a very dangerous sport, and there is
Yeah.
a small part of excitingness about that. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you also don't want to see anyone die.
No, absolutely
I think
not.
the
No,
the
no.
wrecks are spectacular. They're
Yeah.
crazy to see, crazy to watch. But the fact that Roman walked away from that crash.
I honestly thought that I watched a death live on
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah, that's really
I
awful.
honestly, because I watched that race live,
Yeah.
and I think when that happened, your listeners don't know, our listeners
Yep.
on the RLR podcast know, but I go over to my grandparents' house to watch
Yes.
the F1
Right,
races. It's something that my grandpa and I still,
Which is awesome.
very much enjoy together.
Yep.
When Roman's crash happened,
Mm-hmm.
I looked at Grandpa Mike and I went, I think we just watched someone die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we looked at each other and we're like,
Which is a really horrifying thing.
and for a minute and a half, well, it was more than that. For a minute and a half, it took him to get out of the car. He was literally burning alive in the car.
Yeah.
And then for 5 minutes after the accident, there was no updates because they were trying to get him out and assess the situation.
Oh, sure.
And,
Oh, yeah.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So for 5 minutes, we're sitting there going,
Yeah.
what on earth is happening
Yep.
right now?
That's what was
It's pretty
so scary. I had never seen the footage of Senna's crash until this documentary.
Oh, really?
And when
You
I
hadn't-
saw
yeah.
his head bouncing around, I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that was lights
Well,
out right
yeah.
there."
And so, and here's a stupid thing on my part. I'm going, oh, look, he's moving. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
which is awful because he probably,
I do want to get
Yeah.
to, as we get off topic, but I do
Yeah.
want to get to your thoughts on the end of the documentary.
Okay.
Because I think we
Yeah,
outlined what had happened,
Yes, we.
but as a viewer, what did you think of how they wrapped it up and addressed Michael's current health?
So I'm gonna be I'm gonna sound like an awful viewer, but I was very confused by it. I didn't like the ending. I didn't like the way they wrapped it up. I didn't like honestly, I didn't like any part of the end of it at all, because as a viewer, as someone who wants to know what the story is, I want to at least get something clear cut. They never, ever, ever said what the accident was, what the extent of the injuries were, or anything like that. And I'm sorry, but as a
Yeah.
current 2021 year viewer,
Yeah, well, I can fill in the gaps
okay,
for you.
all right, well, thank you, because they didn't do. And so
Well,
as far as the
but
movie goes,
also, ever since the accident, it's been very hush hush.
Sure.
I think this is the first interview his wife has given since the accident.
Yes.
Really? Okay.
Which
well,
is like so.
all right.
Which happened? What it was filmed or released in 2021. So like, what is it?
and-
That's like 8 years since it happened. The first interview. Like,
Well, yeah. And by the way, I totally understand. His personal life is his personal life, and
100%,
she's
yeah.
very much protective
but
of
in
it.
terms of the story, it would have been nice to get a wrap up.
Yeah, just some sort of a
However,
wrap-up. Go ahead.
So
Yeah.
what happened
But-
was. Did you have
Nope.
something to say?
well, I was just gonna say, in real life, we don't really have a wrap up. I
Right.
mean,
yeah,
it's
that-
true.
that's
still
Right.
true, too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Michael Schumacher is still physically alive.
Yes.
Somewhere. They won't
Right.
even disclose where he is.
Right. Exactly.
But we kind of, I was thinking about that actually today. It's like one day Michael Schumacher is going to die.
Yes.
And is it going to be a big funeral procession, or is it just going to be like, I think the public has kind of just accepted the fact that he's passed.
That he's gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
That he's gone. So yeah, which is really sounds very cold to say, but they've really kept him out of everything.
Yeah,
So anyway,
yeah.
but so fill
So-
in the gap. I mean, it's
So, as you saw in the documentary, they were
skiing.
skiing.
Right.
The snow was not ideal,
And he says that.
and he says that, and those were literally
Yeah.
his last words.
Right.
But they were going down the hill, and he had a skiing accident, and I believe what the story was is he went to go recover. The snow was compacted in one spot and not in
Yeah.
another, and he slipped on the uncompacted, hit the compacted, went over his skis,
Mm-hmm.
and snapped his brainstem on a
Oh,
tree.
jeez.
So
Wow.
he had a horribly traumatic brain injury,
Yeah.
and was airlifted, and from that day forward, I mean, it's literally just fought to have a heartbeat and anything.
Wow.
But he's
Wow.
so according to Ferrari engineers who used to work with him,
Yeah.
one of them said, and his wife was very upset that he said this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's out there now.
Mm-hmm.
He is alive, but he's completely uncommunicative.
Okay.
So he's there. I'm sure he can still, to an extent, make expressions or but he
Yeah.
can't talk. He doesn't understand what people are telling him.
Okay.
He is, for all intents and purposes, in a vegetative state.
Gotcha. That's what I was going to say. and
Although I
it
did
seems like it is.
see a thing that his wife said that he's been making small improvements.
He
But she
has
hasn't
been.
disclosed what that is.
Right.
Supposedly he has been, and Gene Todd, who's in the documentary, who is, well, it's no longer as of I think yesterday, but was the FIA, the governing body of Formula One's
Oh, right.
president.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
He was one of the engineers at Ferrari when Michael was there,
Oh, okay.
and he's a very close friend of the family.
Yeah.
And he has said over and over, he's like, she is very protective of him.
Mm-hmm.
We will not know. I see a day where Michael could get better,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know when that is, and I couldn't tell you what better really means.
Yeah.
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 So the actual documentary, I wish we could get more information. I wish it did
Yeah.
have a nicer bow on it, whether
Well,
that would have been
something.
them straight up saying like this is
Something.
what happened. But I also understand, I think from what it seems like from the articles I've read about his wife and his family life and things like that, it
Yeah.
seems pretty tight knit.
Mm-hmm.
And I would almost imagine when they got to that part that most interviewees were like, no, like this should be a documentary about his life,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
his current state.
Right.
So I think
No.
they had to ride that line for
I-
sure.
And I understand that, but there is a bit of something that people have to, and again, this is going to sound really awful, but people have to pay for their stardom. So if you are in the public eye, people expect certain things of those people in the public eye. They expect to see and hear those things because that's part of the price you pay
Yeah.
to be in the public eye. If you're not in the public eye, that's fine. No one expects to hear or see anything about you. So it's that thing of, okay, well, there's this.
I agree with that. I also think that there's limitations. Like, people deserve privacy, even though they're public figures. But
They do to a certain extent. I
but
agree.
your expectation of privacy is significantly reduced.
Right. Yes.
when you are famous and
Right.
world
But
known.
it was also very. I do understand the wife's standpoint.
Oh, sure, I
because
do too,
As
yeah,
they
I
showed in
do,
the
yeah.
documentary, Michael never liked the paparazzi.
Right.
And they show that footage of him, and
In the
people
very
are like,
beginning.
like sign this, sign this, sign
Yeah.
this, sign this, and he's
Yeah.
like, no, no,
Yeah.
like I just want to go race the car.
Yeah.
So I can understand. I mean, that would be a terrible situation for her to be in, and trying to keep wishes of your,
Yeah.
you know,
It's a.
husband.
I understand. It's a very difficult thing, but if you are in the public eye, and that's a profession that you've chosen,
Mm-hmm.
you have to understand that there's going to be a certain amount of people being in your life that you don't necessarily want them to be, but that's part of it. That's part of the game. That's part of what you have to give up to have that notoriety and that, that stardom, that fame.
Perfect F1 example. We were talking before we started recording earlier today about the rules on the grid.
Yes.
The media
right.
rules.
Yes. Very good. Yes. Yes.
If you are on the grid, and
Yeah.
this was put to the test at the American Grand Prix
Mm-hmm.
down at COTA.
Yeah.
If you are on the grid, you have no expectation of privacy against the media companies that are allowed to shoot on the grid.
Right.
Martin Brundle can come up to you and ask you any question
Yep.
that he feels is comfortable to ask
Right.
you, including asking American rap star Megan Thee Stallion if she has any raps for us today. Why?
Yeah.
And it was
So,
so
yep,
out of touch
All right.
in the way that he asked it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, her bodyguards tried to step in and her media person tried to step in.
Yeah.
It is clearly defined in the rules. If you are on that grid and you are a part of the grid walk, you have no expectation of privacy.
Right. And that's and that is one of those things where, especially in that area, that's what the rules are, and you don't have that privacy. I understand too. Again, people need to have their privacy.
But I also feel like there's no expectation that you don't have to share anything you don't want to. With that stuff, I feel like being a star, there is that sort of you lose some sort of privacy.
You do.
But I feel
yeah.
like you also don't owe the public any form of sort of look into your life or
Now,
objection to your privacy.
yeah, I mean it's hard because that is part of being a famous person is that people want to know about you.
Yeah.
That's why they buy magazines. That's why you have audiences and fans because they want to know everything about you.
Well, not to get too deep on the Unnamed Movie Car podcast, but
right, exactly.
but that's a huge debate
Yeah.
that's going on right now is parasocial relationships with Instagram and TikTok stars and all these people of they are not actually your friend.
Right.
They don't owe you anything.
Yeah.
No, that's true. They don't. I mean, I get that. They don't.
Which again, I see your side of it and I kind of see where Zach's coming from too. And I'm going, yeah, I agree with both.
Yeah.
You have an expectation. You can't expect. Okay, let's take the most popular example, the Kardashians. You can't expect.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You can't expect as a Kardashian,
Mm-hmm.
or if I pulled a Pete Davidson and started dating Kim K, you can't. I wouldn't expect that I would have any privacy left anymore.
Exactly.
Because that's the price of dating someone who is extremely famous or being famous. In the same respect, I don't see why it would be required of me to, if someone said, "Hey, what's your home address?" and I would have to say,
Right.
"Oh, it's 726
Right.
Beverly Hills Drive or
Right.
whatever."
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is I'm not at all saying that I am famous, but there are people on my YouTube channel that say, "Hey, we want to see more of your girlfriend in videos."
Right.
And I say, "No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to invade her privacy.
Right.
I don't want her in those videos because there are a lot of creeps online. There's a lot of weirdos online.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people online that also just straight up don't understand boundaries.
Right.
I've had people ask me, or people have found out what town I live in based off of my videos.
Right.
And they'll ask me increasingly personal questions about the town that I live in. And it's I don't owe you any answer to that. You know what I mean? Just because I make a portion of my life public. My career is rather public. I get money off of how public it goes.
Right.
I don't owe you that portion of my life. I don't owe you any form of interaction with any of my family members. I don't owe you any of that sort of portion of my life. I just don't feel that way.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is that there is though still the expectation, because with my dad and his notoriety in town, he was probably the most known person in the entire town. Anywhere we went, people would come up when we were out as a family and completely monopolize him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was part of him and being who he was to, spend time with them or whatever and talk to them and all this stuff. And so
I also feel like Grandpa didn't have Zach and I kind of have the understanding that we have a boundary that we wouldn't cross. Like if someone came to us and said, "Hey, what's your home address?"
I don't think he had to.
Grandpa would have given you his social security number.
He
if you
probably
asked
would have. Yeah,
politely.
that is pretty true. Yeah, that is true.
So I think
maybe. I mean, it's just maybe it's a different.
But then again, you grew up
time.
with Grandpa being your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a different experience as to.
Yeah.
And we grew up with him as Grandpa. Like we
Well,
kind of understand that to
because
an extent.
we knew in the family that we would just have to sit there and
Yeah.
take people coming into our life. I mean, we literally had people who would come up and take dad aside or do literally stop our conversations. I would be talking to my dad and someone would come up and start talking to my dad, cutting off our conversation,
Yeah.
when we were at an event. And that was just the way it was. I mean, these people
Yeah.
just felt like they could do that. But
I think it goes both ways, and I think it's a very similar argument as the freedom of speech argument, where, if everyone, I think everyone should have a freedom of speech, but that is good or bad. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
the freedom of speech should work for, the things you believe in. But, if that person doesn't believe in the same thing as you, that doesn't mean that they don't deserve freedom of speech.
Right.
If that's what you're
Right.
kind of getting at.
Yeah,
Is
to a
that,
certain
like,
degree. Yeah.
Yes, there is the public wants one thing and feels that they deserve one thing
Right.
from the celebrity.
Right.
But the celebrity also has the right to
Yeah.
not share that stuff.
Right, exactly.
If you know what
Yeah.
That's
But
the
it's-
point that I'm getting at, is that, like, yes, the public deserves something, but I think that they're not deserved everything, and vice versa.
Oh, right. No, I understand. I completely get that.
Yeah.
I agree. It's just that when you, I'm not even going to get it anymore because it could be a very long discussion.
Yeah.
But
in the sense of this documentary,
yes,
I personally knowing as much as I do about the
Yeah.
Schumacher story,
right.
I didn't feel it necessary to see him or have them describe what his condition was
Right.
or anything like that.
No,
You know what
But
I
then
think?
again, I have more background, and I
Right.
think to someone who has now who didn't know who Michael Schumacher was, who's now gotten invested in this, yeah, I could see how people would be like, well,
what happened?
what happened? What's his
I
condition?
think would have remedied this whole thing
Yeah.
is when they were showing that, cut to a couple of the news anchors, segments saying Michael Schumacher has been in an accident.
Right.
Something like that. Because I don't even think they said that he was in an
Something-
accident.
They
did
kind of did in the
Well,
documentary.
they were
kinda had
showing these gorgeous drone footage
Right,
of the
of
Swiss
the-
Alps,
right.
and they were playing the news clips.
They were
audio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
over
they did.
it.
So
I think it would have been just show even the Top Gear segment, because right when it happened, Jeremy Clarkson on Top Gear was like, "Hey, we're wishing Michael a speedy recovery
right.
from a skiing
Right,
accident
yeah.
in the Swiss Alps or wherever they were. Best of wishes, Michael." I wish that they would have thrown a little bit more context in there, not necessarily even from the family but just what happened,
Yeah,
because it was
right,
kind of vague.
right.
And if you didn't know what happened, it was very curious as to what that would have been.
Right. I didn't want to see him sitting in a hospital bed. I didn't want to. I mean, that's wrong. But
Mhm.
any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But just to have some closure into what happened. I mean, and what
Right.
was the
I think
actual
for
thing.
someone that wasn't familiar,
Yeah, it was.
I think that was definitely another portion.
And-
like you said with the verbiage of Formula One, I think that was another thing where like, well, I'm sure the people working on the movie were big Formula One fans
Right.
and big Michael Schumacher fans,
Right.
so they're like, oh, it's very common knowledge of what happened. But
True.
I think
Yeah.
someone coming from a not Formula One background and not Michael
It was
Schumacher
very
fan
vague at the end,
background, it
but
was
yeah.
a little too vague.
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
have the
and-
movie.
And I can understand. Obviously, no one wants to see
Someone in that state.
Someone in
Yeah.
that state or accident photos
Right,
or anything
right,
like that.
Exactly. No
You know,
need for that.
Yeah.
Right. I totally get that.
I don't think there was any need for that.
Yeah.
But like I said, I've known about Michael Schumacher since I was little.
Mm-hmm.
I have a different way of knowing about him. It was when Jack Kennedy and I would go over and
Yeah,
play in the
that's
backyard
it,
on
that's-
Sundays.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
his
that's right,
dad,
yeah.
his dad was a Schumacher fan, had the
Right.
Ferrari flag in the
Right.
garage.
I,
all the
I
time.
do
yeah.
remember
Yep,
that, yeah.
exactly.
And the old Bud Light one from NASCAR.
Yeah, that's true too.
That's right. So yeah.
So
So I get that.
but I knew Schumacher from the time I was like in second, third, fourth grade, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
I knew the whole thing, and when I was growing up, that skiing accident happened when I was graduating high school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So I was old enough to kind of understand and follow along with the news, and I was
Yeah.
getting into Top Gear at that time, and I was discovering the wonderful way that you can use VPNs on the internet. And I don't think you guys have one that's sponsored, so I won't shout out
We
a
don't have any
specific.
sponsors, so go for it.
Well, you got Anchor.
Oh. Well.
All right. Wow. Great.
We've made $3, so call it what you will.
Hey.
Hey.
We're climbing.
Yeah.
It's something. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but I was discovering like the world of a VPN and the fact that I could watch British Top Gear online
Right, yeah,
by
yeah.
using the
Right.
the link to change my location and all that
Yep,
stuff.
yep.
And that's when I saw it. I found out about Michael Schumacher's accident through British Top Gear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went,
So-
"Oh, holy
yeah.
cow. What's going?" And then I read more about it and I started googling it and kept up with it, and that's why I know it was he snapped his brain stem in a in a horrific skiing accident, and that he had a long recovery, and that he's currently in what can be best described as a vegetative state.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, but that's we're at definitely at time here. And
Oh,
stuff.
yeah,
we
yeah.
need to talk
So
about it.
I
So, but
really loved
yeah,
the
what it-
documentary.
Yeah.
I thought that I would definitely. It's definitely something to check out if you do have a ground level or any interest in Formula One.
Right. Exactly.
I
Yes.
don't
yes.
think that, like, if you're into football and basketball, that it's another sports documentary that you can
Mhm.
just kind of jump into. Like, at least, like, I watched The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan multi-part
You
series.
did. Okay. Yeah.
And, like, that was kind of over my head with some stuff. They were talking
I
about,
wouldn't-
like, averages and, like, all the contracts that go into the NBA. And I'm like, I have
Yeah.
no
that
idea.
I would. That me
Um,
too. That would go over my head. That would.
So I definitely would say if you have some type of knowledge of F1, motor
Yep.
racing,
Yeah.
at least you can understand words like the podium. And that's
Yeah.
not to like downplay
Right.
people. Like if you don't know what a podium is, you're dumb.
Right,
It's just
yeah.
like I would recommend kind of understanding that world a little bit before jumping in. But
Yep.
that being said, like
Yep.
I said, I was at the sweet spot. I didn't know everything.
Sure.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I did not know everything about Michael Schumacher. I still learned a fair amount. I was able to keep up with everything, and
Yeah.
I think it was really interesting.
No,
I gave it 2 thumbs up, I think.
So if it was on, would you watch it?
Would I change the
Or
channel?
would you change channel?
No, I don't think I would. For the fair reason of which by the way, I did sit and just watch this. I didn't
Did you really?
multitask like I
Wow.
normally do.
That's
yeah.
unusual. yeah.
I normally multitask. I'm editing thumbnails or something for
Well, a
my
lot of-
shooting
and-
cars reviews.
And shout out to Shooting
shout out
Cars.
to shooting cars.
And well, because there was a lot of subtitles and stuff, you really had to pay attention to it. You really had to watch.
Yeah,
it.
but that wasn't really the thing. Like, I was kind of locked into the story, but I wouldn't change the channel just solely based off of the F1 noises and
Oh, really? Yeah.
seeing
Yeah.
all of the. I mean, I leave up Drive to Survive in the background a lot of the time while I'm
All right,
working.
yeah.
I just love the noises. I love
Yeah.
the sights. I mean, all the cars, all the different colors, and
Yep.
the champagne
Yep.
showers
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that stuff.
yeah.
I think it's an enjoyable watch. So.
Yeah.
What about you?
I don't think I would change the channel, but I wouldn't sit down and watch it because it was interesting. I liked it. I did give it. I would give it 2 thumbs up too. I would say this was a good. They did a great job. It was beautiful to watch as far as the cinematography and everything from all the clips and everything that they got. Really cool.
I do want to pause you just for a quick second.
Yeah.
Something I forgot to mention.
Okay.
They had a lot of HD footage from like the 90s.
Yeah, they did.
I'm like,
yeah.
this looks like it was shot last year.
Yeah, it was pretty.
I was
amazing.
really
It
impressed
was-
with
yeah.
that. But sorry,
It
go
was.
ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it does look good. And
I actually,
so
I was curious if some of it was digitally up-resed.
no, maybe
I was
it
very
could've been.
like
Could've been,
I
yeah.
was not. It almost at some points looked almost like deep faked, like they like somehow up-resed this like VHS.
I don't know.
footage, but-
It was very.
Yeah,
They
sorry.
they
Keep
did a
jumping,
good job.
but-
It was beautiful. It was cinematography was great. The music was great. Everything was great. I mean, they really did a good job with this documentary. Better than I thought. Than the
Rush.
no.
Oh.
Well, definitely better than Rush.
obviously.
Everything's better than Rush,
I know,
but
I know.
except for Christmas Cars. Anyway, if no, it was
boy.
the other documentary that we watched with the chili cook-off. Who's the guy with the Shelby?
What?
Shelby American.
Oh, Carol Shelby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was much better done than
Yes,
Shelby
that-
American.
I
really do.
immediately thought I was like, hey, look, they're interviewing people in the double digits, not the 4 digits like Carol Shelby documentary. There was like a new
What is that?
interviewee every 10 or not
That-
like every 10 seconds.
there
there
was
was a different person being interviewed.
so many people.
Another thing I totally forgot to mention
Yeah.
about this movie.
Mhm.
I love the fact that they interviewed the wife, kids, which I also I
Yep.
didn't know he had a daughter.
I didn't know
Um,
that either.
yeah, I
but
didn't
looks
know that.
just like him.
Yes.
But
Large
every
child.
every time they came on screen,
Yeah.
the title came back. A lot of
Yes.
documentaries, they'll just show the
Yes.
title one time,
right.
and then like you're 20 minutes in, and you haven't seen this guy since minute 1, and you're like,
You're
wait,
like,
who
who
is
is
this guy again?
Exactly. I
They
love
did the title every time.
love
and
that
I
they do that.
Loved that.
I love that too.
loved
I
that.
appreciate that when they bring that back and they say, okay, this is Bob, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, that's right. That's the other
Right,
guy.
right,
He
right,
was
yeah.
the race. Anyway, very, very good. So, Nick, how about you? I mean, would you change the channel? What would you do? If it came
So
on.
let me put it this way: if it was the middle of the day, I wouldn't change the channel.
Okay.
Again, like Zach said, for the just I could legitimately just listen to F1 sounds all
I'm
day
sure.
long.
Yeah.
And I know the story of Michael Schumacher, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously I think I've proven I probably know the story a little bit.
Oh,
better
yeah.
than they
Much.
showed in the
Yeah,
documentary.
definitely. Yeah.
So I still learned a few things. If it was like late night and it was this was on, but highlights of the most recent F1 race were on the
right.
channel
Yeah. Yeah.
right below it,
Yeah.
I'd probably change the channel.
Okay.
But that's just because I know the story so
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I mean, I saw it enough that I was like,
It
okay,
doesn't-
got it.
Yeah, it doesn't have a whole lot of rewatchability.
No, not really. But
but-
again, they did a very good job.
Yeah.
That's not just, that they did a great job. So, anyway, what?
Yeah.
So what are we doing now? I really don't even know. What are we into February?
Yes.
Are we? Okay.
So happy birthday next week, by
yeah.
the way.
Happy birthday, Nick.
So
February 6th.
we
right?
are
Or February.
jeez, he got it wrong. I
No,
hope that was
February-
on purpose.
what?
You said February 6th.
I know, but I was thinking for some reason.
Oh,
Never
okay.
mind. Okay.
Was that a joke, or did you just mess up your son's birthday? No,
Because I'm legitimately confused now.
you're sundowning real hard today.
Oh no.
February 8th
Yes.
Yeah.
is your
There you
birthday.
go.
Yeah.
February 28th is the dog's birthday.
Oh, that's right.
Were you
Yeah.
mixing up his birthday with the
No,
dog?
I was not. For some reason, F in February made me think of 6, like F6. I don't know why.
We are watching Fast and Furious 6.
Well, that's
February, so.
So well, I was sorry. Anyway, so yeah. So
we are entering a month of Fast and Furious. So it is Fast and Furious February. So we'll be doing. So we've already done 1 and 2 last year.
Yes, we did.
And you should definitely go listen to those
Yeah.
episodes. So we are doing next week.
Lieberman again.
Shout out to Craig Lieberman. A lot of shout outs.
Yeah,
to Craig
a lot
Lieberman.
of really,
A lot
yeah.
of shout outs to Craig Lieberman.
So next week we're doing Tokyo Drift. Then next week after that is The Fast and the Furious, which is the 4th one.
Okay.
Then there's Fast 5.
No, Fast and Furious is the 4th one.
Oh,
There's
just
no
Fast
those.
and Furious? Okay,
There's
just
no
Fast
those.
and Furious.
Fast and Furious is the fourth
Fast
one.
and Furious. Okay.
The Fast and the Furious is the first one.
Oh, is it?
So,
Okay.
let me restart here.
Okay.
So next week is The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, the
Oh,
third
boy.
one.
Right.
Then there's Fast and Furious.
Mm-hmm.
Then the 5th one is Fast 5.
Okay.
We'll be doing that one, and then we'll end February with, I believe, Furious 6.
Yes.
Furious 6. Okay.
Yes. So Fast 5 and then Furious.
Family.
Yeah.
Family.
So it's Fast and Furious February. There are 4 Saturdays in February, so we're gonna be hitting 4 Fast and Furious movies. We're gonna run through a fair amount. We were thinking of trying to get all 9 into one month,
I don't think we
but
can
that's
do that. I mean, that's a
that's
lot.
rough.
That's a
That
lot
is-
to cover.
that's
a lot of
torture.
family.
Well, because Tokyo Drift is really different than the rest of them.
Right.
So that'll be very different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So
Yep.
Fast and Furious February is fully on its way after this episode,
Yeah, definitely.
which I'm super excited about. What?
Nothing. No,
you're
I
gonna have
this is
to. You're gonna have to
hilarious.
load up family onto your soundboard.
Yeah. So I know, but
thank you guys so
yeah.
much for listening. Thank you,
Yep.
Nick, for coming on.
Yes,
check
thank you,
out
Nick, for coming
RLR on Spotify and YouTube. Check us out on Spotify and YouTube if you're
Yep.
listening on Spotify or iTunes or Stitcher.
Yep.
Check us out on YouTube. You can see my little Michael Schumacher drawing that I did.
yes, very
and
good.
get prepared for Fast and Furious February.
Yes, sounds good.
So thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
All right. Bye bye.